waves through it. So it takes a while to dissipate that so we can hear from the guys. Remember how worried we used to get for that few minute blackout? So plasmas are important, and when I was on my way to do what I thought, to take what I thought would be the world's best job for me, way back in 1969, I took the job. Unfortunately, as I was driving across the country, I heard on the radio that the program that was supporting that at McDonnell Douglas was canceled. And I report for action, and the gal says, you realize we just laid off 5,000 people. I said, yeah, I realize that. They let me stay for 3 months, and one of the things I did was a literature search of the government technical report literature, not the overall scientific literature, using one key word, magnetoaerodynamics. That's one word, it's a long one. And even I was surprised at what I found. 900 references, of which 90% were classified. This is in 1970. Somebody was doing a lot of work on that. You say, well, what's that got to do with anything? What's the point? Well, if you got an electrically conducting fluid, ionized air, around something moving in the atmosphere, and you can interact with electric and magnetic fields, you can control lift, drag, heating, sonic boom production, radar profile. All those are very useful when you're flying in the atmosphere. So somebody was doing a lot of work back then. And there is a direct analog. Dr. Stuart Way of Westinghouse Research Labs built an electromagnetic submarine. You say, why are you connecting a submarine with something moving in the air? Because seawater is an electrically conducting fluid. 2% salt solution for any chemist out there. And it worked. Used graduate student labor at University of California, Santa Barbara. They spent $2,000. If it had been government sponsored, it probably would have been $200,000. And the Japanese built one too. That worked. No moving parts. Slipping silently through the seawater. Really neat. So, of course, Phil didn't talk about any of that stuff. In case after case, he used the tactics not just of debunkers, but liars and cheaters and misrepresenters. Ample documentation to prove that. It's case after case where it was clear that what he said simply wasn't true. And interesting, from my point of view, I mentioned Operation Majestic 12 earlier. This supposed document, supposedly talking about this group set up to report to the president about flying saucers. And one of the documents, the question was, are the documents genuine? Well, Phil, with his usual verve and strong views, challenged me. Maybe you didn't realize that that memo was done in the large pica type. But then remember when we used typewriters? I think some of you are old enough to remember that. There was pica and elite. Elite is small, pica is big. Maybe you didn't notice it was done in the large pica type. But the standard was elite. I got 9 documents that prove that. And I challenge you to find any genuine memos, letters, etc., in the right time frame, signed by the right people, using the same size and style pica type. And I will give you $100 each, up to a maximum of 10, unfortunately. He had never been to the Eisenhower Library. But of course he could talk knowledgeably about the documents that were there. No, he couldn't. I spent weeks there. So I took him up on his challenge. A couple of weeks later, he gave me 60 days, just to show how generous he was. And I was going there anyway, so I went there, dug out 14 pica-type documents meeting all his criteria. Made copies, sent him the copies and an invoice for $1,000. He said, "I'll limit to 10. And he paid me. Told everybody about challenging me, nobody about paying. And he got very upset when I published a copy of his check. Let's see, there's the memo, there's the check. And the reason he wrote S. Terry Friedman, which is, my middle name is Terry, is that he objected to the way one of the members of the group was titled, using the full name, you know. And so I told him, I wrote him, I said, look, sometimes I'm Stanton T, sometimes I'm Stanton Terry, sometimes I'm S. Terry, sometimes I'm Terry. Oh, if I hear somebody on the phone say Terry, I know it's somebody I knew when I was growing up. So he got very upset, threatened to sue me. And I wrote him, I said, Phil, look, you sent me a check. I Xeroxed the check. I took the check to the bank. The bank cashed the check. I can do whatever I darn please with the Xerox. And he shut up. His father had been a lawyer. You know how lawyers love to write these threatening letters? That's a small part. And he almost destroyed Jim McDonald. Lied about him, misrepresented about him. And it's incredible, I'll call it the evil of the man. Because in so many of the cases, the truth was readily available. All he had to do was look for it. But if given a choice between something that held up his side of the argument and the truth, he'd always pick out what held up his side of the argument. The truth be damned. So he was, I call him one of the outstanding propagandists of the 20th century. He's deceased now. And you read back over his files. Kathleen was just looking, I was supposed to be there, but I had a little heart attack that got in the way, checking out his papers in Philadelphia. But the kicker was that he was a member of the press, you see. So naturally, anybody with a question would talk to Phil. Works for Aviation Week. Who could ask for anything more? Trained as an electrical engineer. A very nasty man. And you notice how it says MJ12 research there. You see, I saved him that much money, he would, and I did check incidentally. I checked back then and I checked again. He never visited the Eisenhower Library. That's where the documents are that we were talking about. He hasn't spent much time at the archives around Washington, even though he lived there, and I've spent plenty of time at the archives there. Never went to Harvard. It's amazing, the power of the nasty, noisy negativists. Partly because I think about in how many other areas are we being given the false information, the misrepresentation. It's not just flying saucer. It's an epidemic of misrepresentation. Oh, he didn't leave me out of his letters either. I didn't find this one out until a few years ago. He wrote this way back in 1989 to the Canadian government, warning them that I was going to move to Canada. And let me see if I can read it. It's not that I enjoy reading it, but said something, let's see. He had some strong, nasty comments to make. I didn't know about the letter. He was warning the Canadian government that I was going to be there. And I'd be talking about the cosmic Watergate. I never gave the Canadian government a hard time. I did visit the archives, unlike him. And Richard Dolan dug this out when he was there looking for other stuff. He thought I knew about it. So I got my copy from him. But not only Jim McDonald, but there were numerous cases where he wrote really nasty stuff. Oh, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, head of Project Blue Book Scientific Consultant. And Allen had a decent article in the FBI publication, in effect saying to the FBI, the Center for UFO Studies would love to receive copies of any reports that people want to make about flying saucers, thus relieving the FBI of the duty of doing anything about it, which they didn't want to do anything about. You can understand that. And he wrote nasty stuff about Allen Hynek, practically saying he wasn't a scientist. Really, and it's on the internet, if you check out Philip Klass FBI file, you'd find it. And the FBI, to their credit, said Klass had no credibility. Turned out, in two different instances, they had wanted to prosecute him for releasing national classified information, but to do so would have revealed that the stuff was classified. So they had to let him get away with it. But they responded strongly to it. He was saying, in effect, Hynek wasn't a scientist. After all, he was only the chairman of the Department of Astronomy at Northwestern University. But it's a good example of Phil's really vicious kind of attitude. I mean, I think, personally, Jim McDonald was a much more important ufologist. But Allen was certainly a decent, honorable individual and not worthy of that kind of, not deserving of that kind of viciousness. There's the Eisenhower Library. There's the American Philosophical Society Library in Philadelphia. And I don't know how Klass's papers got in there. Condon's papers are there too. Looks like that was taken a long time ago, doesn't it? Except there is a car off to the left, if you think carefully. And Klass not being a scientist, it's hard to know why his papers are there, but there is room here for anybody who's taking journalism in college to do a good study here. I'll help anybody who needs some examples. There are plenty of them around of bad press coverage. Oh, there's Larry King. Phil and I have done several television programs. Larry, at least, look, he's not the sharpest knife in the block. But in two different instances, the reason for showing him, one case he was on with Dr. David Jacobs of Philadelphia, who did his PhD thesis on the history of flying saucers. And he was on with the book about UFO abductions. And Larry asked Phil what he thought about the book. Well, all those people in there are people who had mental health problems, he said. Now, you understand, the introduction to the book was written by Dr. John Mack, a Harvard University psychiatrist. Outstanding scientific background about, but he was in a position to say whether people were mentally disturbed or not. Well, halfway through the program, Larry asked Phil, "Did you read that book?" "No." Second time, he was on with Kevin Randall, who was talking about a book on Roswell. And again, Phil made all kinds of comments, nothing happened there in Roswell and so forth. Halfway through the program, "Did you read the book?" "No." I mean, this is the way a decent representative of the press is supposed to respond. You give opinion. I mean, it's not that Kevin and I agree about everything about Roswell, we don't. But he spent a heck of a lot of time on it. And Phil spent practically no time on it. He's not entitled to give a supposed professional opinion when he hasn't looked at any of the evidence. Larry isn't doing anything on television anymore, is he? Does anybody know?
Internet.
Oh, he's on the internet. Oh.
Yeah, he's
okay.
on
You gotta get on with him again. I did his radio program 30-some years ago. There's Dave Jacobs. He actually taught a course for more than 20 years at Temple University about flying saucers, and did one of the first PhD theses on UFOs. So that takes courage. There's Kevin Randall. Oh, Michael Shermer. He's head of the Skeptics Society. And doesn't know a damn thing about flying saucers, but he's perfectly willing to speak out about them. We did a debate on Coast to Coast radio. Everybody listens to Coast to Coast. Some people listen to Coast, don't you? We debated. And it was because we had both appeared on the Larry King Show. And his main contribution was playing with little alien dolls sitting next to me and interrupting people. So, because George Noory of Coast to Coast was on the show as well, I talked to George, how about a debate between me and Michael? He'd had Michael on the show, so it wasn't like... So sure. Now, I have a handicap when I'm on that show because I live in the Atlantic time zone, which is 1 hour ahead of here and 4 hours ahead of California. So when I'm on, it's usually between 3:30 and 6:30 in the morning, which is not my best time, to tell you the truth. Anyway, Michael starts off. George asks him, what's your take on UFOs? Well, it's like with all these other paranormal, you heard that word yesterday, those of you who were here, topics, there's this small 5% residue, says Michael, that can't be identified just because there isn't enough data. And I immediately jumped in. He gave me an opening big enough to drive a Mack truck through. I said, what you've just said is totally untrue. Blue Book Special Report 14 has data on 3,201 sightings, of which 21.5% were unidentifiable, completely separate from the 9.3. I rattled off a bunch of this stuff real quick so you wouldn't be able to interrupt me, of which 9.3% were listed as insufficient information and the probability. I went on with facts. And I mentioned the University of Colorado study. I said, according to the UFO subcommittee of the world's largest group of space scientists, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, 30% of the 117 cases studied by Dr. Condon could not be explained. One could come to the opposite conclusions, they said, on the basis of the data in the report. And I gave the reference, it was published, that's a statement. And I rattled off 3 other ones. And it may not be a surprise that I got 80% of the vote. He took a vote at the end of the show, you called in, who won kind of thing. I doubt if he'd be willing to debate me again, frankly. Because he knows he'd have to do some studying and he doesn't want to look at the facts. There's Joe Nickel. He's the chief scientific investigator for the Committee for Scientific Investigation. Used to be known as the SICCOP, Committee for Claims of the Paranormal, that kind of stuff. Now, Joe has 3 degrees in English. That's good preparation for scientific evaluation, isn't it? Couple of examples of Joe's dedication to truth, or lack thereof. There's a famous case in Flatwoods, West Virginia, the Flatwoods Monster case. And there's an excellent book about that. Joe did visit Flatwoods, I'll give him credit. He didn't go to the location of the site, didn't talk to any of the witnesses. That would be too much trouble. Now, I've been there in the town and talked to witnesses and been at the actual location. But he found an explanation. A 6-foot-tall owl. That's what he said. Now, I talked to a lot of people in the area. I couldn't find anybody who'd ever heard of there being a 6-foot-tall owl there. That's typical Joe. Well, another example. When I was in Roswell for the 50th anniversary at the museum, there was a television camera there looking at me, and Joe was being interviewed in Los Angeles. We couldn't see each other, but we could hear each other. And he was asked for the explanation, and he said, well, an unnamed public information officer put out an unauthorized press release. And that's what that story was all about. And I said, you don't even know his name, do you? Well, no. Well, I've been in his home. That's Walter Houghton. He's in all the respectable books by investigators about Roswell. It's not a secret. I said, you realize, or maybe you don't, he was the public information officer, yes, for the most elite military group in the world. He hadn't, the noisy negativist never mentioned that, of course. Just a military group down in dusty old Roswell, that's good enough, isn't it? And I mentioned also, he was chosen, he was a bombardier during World War II, did more than 20 missions bombing Japan, and he was chosen to drop the instrument package over one of the atomic bombs exploded in Operation Crossroads in 1946. You gotta pick your best bombardiers, because without the instrument package in the right place, why would you run the test? But that's typical Joe, and you'd think he would have learned something from that exchange. About 9 years later, their magazine covers a story about science and UFOs, and he repeats the same nonsense. An anonymous press officer put out an unauthorized press release. That's what happened in Roswell. I don't know how these guys can live with themselves. Certainly truth isn't what determines what they say or what they do. He's still around, making false claims. It's standard. Dear Isaac Asimov, now I will be the first to grant he was one of the finest science fiction writers ever. He published more than 400 books, many of them on science. But he said some very stupid things about flying saucers. He didn't do his homework, of course. Why would you spend any time on something as silly as this? I think I have a quote. Yes. He calculated by a totally unscientific fashion that the nearest home planet, the average distance, first he said, the average distance between advanced civilizations is 13,500 light years. And then he switches in the next sentence with the nearest one, home planet of flying saucers, being 13,500 light years away. Now, a kid in junior high knows that just because the average distance is something doesn't mean that's the distance to the nearest one. When I lived in California, the average distance of the top 10 population cities was something like 1,800 miles. The nearest one was 30 miles away. That's the first thing. And the notion that it's 13,500, that was absolute nonsense. Just to educate you, within 54 light years of here, there are 2,000 stars. Within 1,000 light years of here, not 13,000, within 1,000 light years, there's about 8 million stars. And judging by the Kepler satellite, that means about 8 million planets. And he said almost every sighting is a mistake or a hoax. What does almost every sighting mean? Almost nobody is 7 foot tall. Tell it to the basketball coach. He says, I don't care about the other guys. Give me one big guy. That'll do it. My work in nuclear physics, uranium-235, there are 140 atoms of uranium-238 for each atom of 235. Why would you even bother? That's what you need to build the bomb with. The United States, during World War II, built a gaseous diffusion plant. This is a way of separating uranium isotopes. They built it near Oak Ridge, Tennessee, because there's a lot of power available. The plant was 1 mile long. It had a bunch of nickel barriers with little holes in it, and because U-235 is a little lighter than U-238, it goes through just a little faster. So you pump the gas, the gaseous form of uranium, through these barriers. It was 1 mile long, and it used 5% of all the electricity being produced in the United States, in secret. So, small but mighty, you might say. I mean, it's just like if you want a cure for a disease, the fact that there are 500 chemicals that won't cure it doesn't mean there isn't one that will. You got to focus on what's relevant. And I love the next one. They should either come down and say hello, or they should go away. If they do neither, they are not intelligently guided spaceships. Now, how does Isaac know that? He doesn't give you any reason for accepting that nonsense. He can't think of any alternative. A guy who's written 400 books, most of them fiction, besides either, saying hello or going away. He really can't think of reasons for coming here. And if you're wondering, I list more than 20 in Flying Saucers in Science. They're graduate students doing their thesis work on the development of a primitive society. They're being punished, spend a year near Earth. That's a punishment to last a lifetime. Guest, food, lodging, next exit. I mean, you put your mind to it, you can think of a lot. Maybe you didn't know. Do you realize that the Earth is the densest planet in the solar system? Do I mean the people? No, that's a different question. But it turns out a cubic foot, meter if you prefer, of Earth weighs more than a cubic foot of any other planet in the solar system. To which the natural response is, who cares? What difference does it make? Well, it turns out that means that there are more heavy metals here than in the other planets. Who cares about that? Well, heavy metals are rare. We know from studying the stars. Things like osmium, rhenium, platinum, tungsten, uranium, gold. Osmium is twice as dense as lead. These have special properties. So they may be here to mine the good stuff. Look at all the guys who went west for gold. It wasn't 2 or 3. Klondike or 1849 or California Gold Rush or whatever. Look at all the guys who went to follow the oil. A lot of people looking. Maybe they're here to quarantine us. If you were an alien, would you want us out there? We're a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. And maybe you didn't realize it, but we're at a very special point in time. We have joined the advanced civilizations in the galaxy who have learned that almost all the energy in the universe is produced by nuclear fusion. That's what goes on in the sun. And all the other stars. All of them. What does that mean? It's also what goes on in H-bombs. When we Earthlings want to go to advance lots of energy in a small package, we go nuclear all the time. Let me give you an example. 1944, a big bomb was a 10-ton blockbuster. Took a big B-29 to carry this bomb. That's 10 tons of dynamite, let's say. TNT, pick what you want. Releases the energy of a pound of dynamite to make a mess in here. So 10 tons, that's a pretty powerful bomb. That was in 1944. First A-bomb, 1945, in New Mexico, of course, at Trinity Site. Religious people might have a problem with that, but that's what it is, Trinity Site. Released the energy of 17,000 tons of dynamite. We were just getting started. 1952, first H-bomb, fusion device. Released the energy of 10 million tons of TNT. The Russians tested one that released the energy of 50 million tons of TNT. One bomb. Do you see why aliens wouldn't think we were very friendly? I mean, if you dropped that in the middle of New Jersey, you'd start fires from New York to Philadelphia. I grew up in New Jersey, so maybe that's not a bad idea, but anyway, you get the idea. We didn't even know that there were neutrons until 1932. Discovered fission and fusion, sort of discovered, in 1938. But what's the big deal about fusion? You can use it for propulsion. Use the right stuff in the right way and get atoms, particles out the back of a rocket that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. 10 million. I'm not saying there isn't a better way. That's plenty good enough. I worked on a study of fusion propulsion in 1962. Why haven't we built it? Because it costs a lot of money. Lots of money. We're not talking an academic research project here with the 3 professors and 6 grad students. When I was working at General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department in Cincinnati, 1958, we employed 3,500 people. That year, 1,100 of them engineers and scientists. That year, we spent $100 million. And we never tested a nuclear-powered aircraft, to the best of my knowledge, anyway. So these things don't come cheap. But what I'm trying to say is we have to look at this realistically. The SETI cultists act as if there was nothing nuclear going on. I think I have, well, I'll show you a picture, I hope, later. There's Arthur Clarke. I admire the man. He was the first to come up with satellites, for sending signals back and so forth. Brilliant writer. This is what he said. The public is no longer worrying about flying saucers. No longer news. The hysterical credulity of the late 1940s has been replaced, except in the minds of the few surviving cultists. As a creative scientist who was well aware of radar, and yet he at one point said something about you could pick up nuts and bolts, as if we have never picked up UFOs on radar. Loads of good radar cases. Look at Jim McDonald's testimony. Papers published in Aeronautics and Astronautics. Arthur, you didn't do your homework. There's Dr. Ben Boba, edited analog, written a lot. It's not only science fiction, but as an editor. And there was an article, And I wrote about, somebody was saying, why don't you publish more about UFOs? The lack of explanation of the sightings is actually a lack of information. Whenever enough information about a sighting has been obtained, the phenomenon has turned out to be terrestrial in origin. I had sent him documents from Blue Book Special Report 14 and others proving that that was totally false. That the insufficient information sightings were completely separate from the ones that couldn't be explained. It didn't matter. Don't bother me with the facts, my mind's made up. And I mentioned 3 science fiction guys because, well, Isaac did an article in TV Guide, seen by 18 million people. I should have such exposure. These guys all had powerful influence on other people, other journalists. And I don't care whether you call them novelists or journalists, doesn't matter. They spread the word. Oh yes, Neil deGrasse Tyson, outstanding astronomer, head of the Hayden Planetarium. The 2 examples of, I think they're here. Yeah. In a big speech at Penn State, the proof that the government can't keep secrets is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia. Isn't that a brilliant remark? Think about that for a minute. What about the NSC and the NSA and the CIA and the DIA and the NRO? We don't care about those. On a different angle here, our fastest craft would take 70,000 years to get to the nearest star. I was in that same show. Peter Jennings was the host. He didn't interview, somebody else did. And he forgot to add, oh, there's no propulsion system on that craft. That would take 70,000 years to get to the nearest star. It's coasting. It's like saying if I throw a bottle of water into the ocean and see how long it takes to get to the other side, that's a scientific approach to how fast you can move. Or equally foolish, what if you said that, look, the record for going around the Earth in fast time was set by Magellan. You remember Ferdinand? A few hundred years back. Took 3 years. Well, his boat, his ship did. He didn't make it. But some natives took care of that on the way. 3 years. The space station goes around the planet every 90 minutes. 90 minutes versus 3 years. The key is that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future is not an extrapolation of the past. You got to change how you do things. I used to use a slide rule when I started work in industry. Any of you know what a slide rule is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was at a group of students at the University of Detroit. Not one knew, which made me feel very ancient. It's a little device about this big, and they only use it to design the atomic bomb and other things. But I don't use a slide rule anymore. And I certainly don't use sailing ships to go around the planet in a hurry. And if you're going to talk about, let me see if this is, well, okay, well, there's another point I need to make about that. This is a nuclear rocket reactor propulsion system, and schematic, if you will. Liquid hydrogen comes in. Can you see that? Yeah. Comes in, comes around, gets heated, goes up and out. Comes in at close to absolute zero and goes out at over 4,000 degrees. Now this isn't just a drawing. I worked on a system like this. And there it is at Westinghouse. The reactor's in the middle with the nozzle up at the top. The power level was 1,100 megawatts. That's half the power of Grand Coulee Dam. This big. Now, Los Alamos way outdid us. Whoops, what's what happened? Well, Los Alamos was a little larger, less than 8 feet in diameter, 4,400 megawatts, twice the power of Grand Coulee Dam, which is enormous. That was tested back in the late 60s. This is for an upper stage. If you're going to Mars, you can triple the payload by using a nuclear upper stage. We want a lot of energy, we go nuclear. Or how did George Bush say it? Nuclear?
Nuclear.
There's Seth Shostak in a radio telescope. Now, I debated Seth. We each attended the other's 3 lectures on the Queen Elizabeth II. We got a free trip from England to New York, compliments of the British UFO magazine. We were cordial to each other. And of course, the SETI boys have provided no evidence at all that anybody's sending radio messages consistent with our equipment. You know, AM or FM, folks. We debated. I got 57% of the vote, 10%, this is on Coast to Coast, 10% said, I don't know who won, and the other 33% said, Seth won. And now, when he heard one of my lectures on the QE2, I talked about 5 large-scale scientific studies and said, how many people have read this one? And as I said earlier, fewer than 2% have read any. He didn't raise his hand for any of them. So after he came back and after the debate, I called him and asked if I could send him a copy of my book, Flying Saucers in Science. I didn't want to send it if he was going to say no. Sure, and he gave me his address. And 6 months later on Coast to Coast, he admitted when somebody asked that he had my book on his nightstand. He didn't say he read it. That would be going too far. Why would anybody send a message to us? Now, Jill Tarter, Dr. Tarter, who was the model for the, whatever her name was, in Contact, Jodie Foster. Jill Tarter is retired now. Her job is fundraising for SETI. And after Frank Drake had said there might be another civilization as close as 1,000 light years away, and we could be making contact with them. And when we do, it'll be one of the greatest events in man's history, and they'll help us solve our problems. Wait a minute now. Hey guys out there, we need some help. Takes 1,000 years for the message to get there, 1,000 years for their answer to get back. So 2,000 years later, what can we do for you guys? Does that make any sense at all? Not to me, it doesn't. I have trouble with the SETI cultists' silly effort to investigate. S-E-T-I. Oh, this is what he said. That's right. The proof that government can't keep secrets is how badly FEMA, emergency management, handled Katrina and how badly the post offices operate. What's that got to do with governments keeping secrets? Has he never heard of the CIA, the DIA, the ONI, NSA, NRO? There's Seth and I. We've each aged a little bit since then. Oh, I'm not supposed to say astronomer death. sorry about that. This is just a couple of years ago. He said only kooks see UFOs. Any evidence provided? No. Any reference provided? No. Is it true? Absolutely not. There are sightings by astronomers, believe it or not. But this is the kind of stuff one has to deal with. Oh yes. Now, if we're going to talk about keeping secrets, the Washington Post just a year ago had an article, that's the headline, "The Black Budget this past year, $52.6 billion for military intelligence stuff." That's not pocket change. The three leading agencies, CIA, NSA, and NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. Some of their satellites, spy satellites, cost $500 million. You know, so you can read the license plates in the Kremlin parking lot, kind of thing. That's a lot of money. I'm not saying it's all going for UFOs. Probably no more than $10 billion of it. It's truly amazing how ignorant people are, how our money's being spent. Also, I have a gripe with academics who think that the only place research gets done is in academia, of course. And somebody told me, look, Stan, if Roswell had happened, which I say it did, they'd have had to pull half the professors, physics profs from campuses around the country. And I laughed. I said, you gotta be kidding. Are you really unaware of all the people with clearances working for Los Alamos, Sandia, Oak Ridge? There's a half a dozen other places like that. Loads of people with talent and security clearances. That's what it takes. Like I said, $10 billion for stealth, for Lockheed. Not done at your local university. Sorry. I mean, this is real money, $52.6 billion. To me it is anyway. And if you want something done, you go to the people who have the talent and the clearance. Keeping secrets is easy. You don't tell anybody. Well, you know, I hate to tell you this, but the government doesn't always release all the information it has. We filed a suit against the CIA years ago, early 80s, for everything about UFOs. And eventually we got like 900 pages of stuff, but that was only through secret, no top secret. And this is typical of the information. And you can't scrape, somebody said, well, just scrape off the black, Stan. They don't send you original documents. They're not stupid. They may be venial or nasty or whatever else you want to say, but they're not stupid. This is a typical CIA document about UFOs, you know, by their definition. And when we got some more so you could see the actual security markings down the bottom there, it's top secret Umbra. I like this one. Deny in total. They couldn't find 8 words to declassify on this page. This is CIA UFO document. This is the NSA. They use whiteout. Got 156 pages that look pretty much like that, 1 sentence per page. Everything else whited out. And it was funny, when I called the NSA, I'd heard that they were going to be releasing, they're in a long battle. And even their justification to a federal court judge for not releasing the data was classified and very heavily redacted. But I'd heard that they were, because President Clinton signed a new executive order which said everything had to be reviewed and released unless the agencies could provide justification for keeping it classified after X years. Now, nobody was doing anything because they thought Clinton would lose the 96 election. He won. So then the Air Force was looking at 100,000 documents a month. Embarrassed. So the NSA decided they were going to release these documents. So I called and said, I'd heard that. Was that true? Yes. Can I get a copy of the ones you're releasing? Yes. What's your name? Stanton Friedman. Oh, I know all about you. That scared me. What did that mean? Well, Phil Klass had told me that I showed the blacked out documents on television without telling people it was sources and methods data that was being withheld. More than 90% of a document was sources and methods data. Anyway, I got a set of these documents, and on some of them you can actually read top secret umbra at the top. 156 pages. But there's no cover up. I've had people tell me that. I said, well, can you tell me what's under the whiteout? Well, no, but somebody, even people in the UFO community called me, you're looking for me to shut up. Okay. Even people in the UFO movement were telling me, Stan, the NSA is releasing all that UFO stuff. I said, can you read what's underneath the whiteout? Well, no, then they're not releasing it. Okay, I'll go through these quickly. There's the story of Betty and Barney Hill. Kathleen Martin back there did 85% of the work. She's Betty's niece. And if you heard her program yesterday, it was a humdinger. I had a little to do with star map, stuff like that, but the Roswell UFO Hall of Fame inducted me, and the local newspaper over in, this one was from the St. John paper, I guess, did a cartoon in my honor. And I kind of like that. It's always nice to be recognized by your peers, and that says Roswell UFO Hall of Fame. And they even spelled my name right. There's a few of the books. There's some back there. Thanks for listening.